thinking begins to develop, and what thinking develops unfolds into physical expression. So recognition is not observation. Recognition is authorization. It determines what is allowed to take root within. This is the 7-minute daily focus, day 95 of 365, to focus on the world within from the world without. Today's focus, the law of thinking, authority of recognition. Pause for a moment. Recognition is not passive. Recognition carries authority. What you recognize, you accept. What you accept, thinking begins to develop. And what thinking develops unfolds into physical expression. So recognition is not observation. Recognition is authorization. It determines what is allowed to take root within. Pause. Thought is within, effect is without, and thinking stands between. Recognition determines what thought is received. So recognition is the gateway. If recognition is within, the seed is true. If recognition is from what is physically seen, the seed is reactive, and thinking will faithfully develop whichever is received. Thinking determines outcome, but recognition determines direction. Active thinking begins with conscious recognition within. Passive thinking begins with unconscious recognition from appearance. So authority is not in thinking alone. Authority begins at recognition. Where you recognize from determines everything that follows. Recognition must remain within, because if recognition shifts, authority is transferred to appearance, transferred to conditions, transferred to what is physically seen. And once authority is transferred, thinking follows. And when thinking follows appearance, instability begins. This is why awareness is essential, to notice what you are recognizing, to notice where your authority is placed, and to notice whether you are accepting from within or from what is physically seen. Because recognition happens quickly, quietly, often without being questioned. But what is not questioned is accepted, and what is accepted is developed. If recognition is not directed, it becomes reactive, and reactive recognition leads to reactive thinking. But when recognition is conscious, thinking becomes ordered, and ordered thinking supports unfolding. Unfolding, the process of physical expression. So recognition is not something to ignore. It is something to become aware, because it is the beginning of everything. This is where steadfastness becomes power. Remain aligned with what is within. Do not transfer authority to what is physically seen, because what is physically seen is always secondary, and what is within is always primary. Recognition within keeps authority where it belongs. Thinking requires position, and recognition establishes that position. To recognize from within is to remain in authority. To recognize from appearance is to surrender it, so remain aware. Recognize clearly. Remain with it. Let thinking follow. You are not trying to control everything you recognize. You are becoming aware of where recognition begins. So today, observe. Observe what you accept, observe what you recognize, and observe where your authority is placed, and return it to within. Because what you recognize within, you authorize, and what you authorize unfolds, and what unfolds must physically express. Consider this more deeply. Authority is rarely questioned, yet it is constantly being assigned. Every moment through recognition, authority is being placed somewhere. Either it is placed within, or it is placed upon what is physically seen. And wherever authority is placed, thinking follows. So the real question is not what is happening in the world without. The real question is, where is your authority? Because if authority is placed on appearance, then appearance governs thinking. Conditions dictate direction. Circumstances determine response. What is seen begins to define what is accepted. And when this happens, the mind becomes dependent. Dependent on change, dependent on outcome, dependent on what is constantly shifting. But when authority remains within, something changes. Thinking is no longer dependent. It is no longer reactive. And it is no longer unstable. It becomes directed, because it is no longer asking the world without what is true. It is remaining with what is already recognized within. This is true authority, not control over others, and not influence over conditions, but alignment with origin. So authority is not something you gain. Authority is something you recognize and keep, and keeping it requires awareness, because authority is often given away unconsciously. A moment of doubt, a reaction to what is seen, a shift in attention, and suddenly authority moves. It moves from within to appearance, and when it moves, thinking follows. So the discipline is simple, not complicated, not forceful, but aware, to notice when authority begins to shift, to notice when recognition is being taken from within and placed upon what is physically seen, and to return it gently, quietly, without struggle, because authority does not need to be forced back. It only needs to be recognized again within. And when it is recognized, it is restored. This is why awareness is power, because awareness allows you to see the movement of authority. Without awareness, authority shifts unnoticed. With awareness, authority is retained. And when authority is retained, thinking remains aligned. And when thinking remains aligned, continuity is preserved. And when continuity is preserved, unfolding continues without interruption. So throughout your day, observe this carefully, not what is happening outside, but where you are recognizing from. Notice the subtle moments when something appears and attempts to define what is true, when conditions suggest a different direction, when reaction invites you to shift. And in those moments, return to within, return to recognition, return to authority, because each return strengthens alignment. Each alignment stabilizes thinking. Each stability protects the seed. And what is protected continues. And what continues unfolds. And what unfolds must physically express. Now, the affirmation for day 95. Pause for a moment. I recognize from within. I hold authority within. I do not transfer authority to what is physically seen. My thinking follows what is true. I remain aligned. I remain steady. I remain continuous. And because I remain, unfolding continues, and what unfolds must physically express. Remember, by design, by focus.